there from Australia. That's great. Thanks, Scott. Good morning, Yvonne. So I might start then. So I'd just like to start by acknowledging the country where we're all calling in from today. I'm actually calling in from Gunai country, which is down in Gippsland in Victoria, and I want to pay my sincere respects to elders past and present here, and to the elders of the countries from all of the places where you're all connecting to this lovely presentation this morning. And I want to acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and Indigenous peoples on this call today, and also all of our allies working to improve health equity and all of the important work that you're doing. I want to really acknowledge all of you too. And I want to especially thank Zoe for staying up late at night and come and talk to us from the UK. So Zoë Mullan is Editor-in-Chief of the Open Access Journal, the Lancet Global Health. She's an Ex-Officio Board Member of the Consortium of Universities for Global Health and a Scientific Advisory Board Member for the Centre of International Health Protection at Robert Koch Institute, Berlin, Germany. So between 2013 and 2017, she was a Council Member and Trustee of the Committee of the Publication Ethics, and she trained in Biochemistry at the University of Bath, UK, before joining the publishing industry in 1997 as a Scientific Information Officer with the CABI. She's moved to the Lancet in 1999, where she's worked since, variously as a technical editor, section editor, and then founding editor for the Lancet Global Health. So it's a huge honour for us to have you come and talk to us today, Zoe, as we, in this very special week where we've actually just launched live the First Nations Health and Wellbeing Journal this week, and many of the people on the call are editors and associates of the journal, and we're just really grateful to you for coming and talking to us today. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Kath, for that lovely welcome, and congratulations on the launch of the journal. I didn't realise it had gone live this week. I need to go and check it out as soon as I'm well, in the morning maybe. Okay, well, I've got a few slides, so maybe I'll just share my screen now, if I may. But someone could just give me a shout when you can see it.
Yep, we can see them. They're not on presenter mode, they're on the other mode.
Is that better?
That's it, yep.
Great. Okay, super. So I'm going to talk about peer review, and I'm going to sort of try and talk about the value of it from the perspective of authors, reviewers, and editors, because I think a lot of people on the call are probably a mixture of all three. So I'm a full-time editor, so that's what I do. But I'm aware that you know, most other people working on the journal will probably have a you know, an academic life somewhere else, and so be coming at it from different angles. So I thought I'd quickly just go through what we do at the Lancet, give some reasons to review. You know, what I think sometimes we forget, kind of, why should I do this thing? Then I'll go more into sort of how what the general considerations to think about when reviewing, how to structure your reviewer report, and then things like claiming recognition for peer review, because you know, it is something that's time consuming and not directly paid. So, you know, how do you claim recognition for your work as a peer reviewer? And then there's some further reading at the end that hopefully might be useful as well. So at the Lancet then, we're in the sort of unusual situation, I suppose, of most submissions being rejected by the editors before external review. So about 90% of them are probably rejected at the desk stage on the basis of scope or novelty or the robustness. We don't reject on language. So it does mean that if you do a big pre-screen like that, you're then only sending reviewers the highest quality papers. So that hopefully helps us to acquire some really, really good quality reviewers. And And then what we do is, instead of having a pool of peer reviewers that we call on again and again to review all our papers, we essentially start from scratch with each paper. So we do a sort of bespoke literature search using Scopus to identify researchers who sort of publish regularly on the topic. So again, that sort of helps spread the workload out and means that actually it's quite egalitarian. You know, anybody who's publishing in an index journal could be considered. You don't have to be part of our sort of special pool. And then what we try and do always is we have 4 reviewers minimum for each article, and we would try and make sure that at least one of them was from the country or the region where the work was done. So that would include an Indigenous reviewer if the population under study was Indigenous, so at least one. We try and get 50% female. That's the aim, and we welcome early career stage people. So and then we try and get, you know, somebody specialist in the method, somebody specialist in the subject, and then there's always one statistician as well. So it's quite actually a very time-consuming process to try and get this this spread of reviewers across each paper. Why is my thing not moving? Oh, there we are. And then actually the Lancet Psychiatry also has a panel of reviewers who are themselves users of mental health services. So we're trying to more and more include people who are affected by the research in the actual review process. So this is something of a sort of trial, and hopefully something that will be rolled out across other journals, essentially having, you know, patients, if you like, actually act as reviewers. Lancet Child and Adolescent Health actually has a youth panel as well. So this is something we're kind of trying to explore more at the moment. I should say, please feel free to jump in and ask me any questions at any point. I think that's probably as easy as anything. There's quite a few slides, so maybe don't feel you have to sort of ask questions at the end. I can't see hands. I can only see Kath on the screen. So if you do want to ask a question, please just shout, or Kath can shout that someone's got their hand up.
Alex was just asking actually if you could share the slides afterwards, if that would be okay. So,
oh yeah, I'll definitely
share. I know
share
we'll share a recording as well. So
yeah, so there'll be some links at the end on the further readings slide, so that'll be useful to if you've got the slides, then yeah, you can link to the paper, the things I've recommended. Easy, no problem.
Sorry, Zoe, it's Alexandra again. Thank you for doing this. Very interesting. The use of people with lived and living experience, I assume, is part of the move for patient-oriented or citizen-oriented or whatever the term in use in Britain. We're doing a lot of that in Canada, and I guess I'm just wondering, what sort of training or support are you providing to those members of the review or that particular review board? Because it's very much of interest, I think, from an Indigenous perspective. So,
yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm probably not the best person to answer it actually, because as I say, that our colleagues at Lancet Psychiatry have really sort of pioneered this. I think they have what they tend to do is pair them up with experienced reviewers, so that they will essentially kind of coach them in how to review a paper. But I think there's a large element of mentoring involved, and yeah, but I can certainly find out more about that actually, and follow up if you like. When I send the slides around, I can definitely ask our colleagues for a bit more info on that, because it's a good question. Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
So when we've received all our reviews at the Lancet, we actually discuss the papers as a team in a twice weekly manuscript meeting. There's usually about 30 editors on the call from all of the journals, and we sort of discuss sort of in a sort of democratic way, you know, whether or not to proceed on the basis of the reviewers' comments. And we only tend to reject at this stage. I mean, having put the effort in to send a paper out for review, you know, we're aiming to have it go through to publication. So we'd only reject if the reviewers' comments were deemed to be sort of fatal. You know, there were substantial design flaws, or the paper's not at all novel, which would be not good for a sort of high impact journal. If the reviews are split, if 2 are strongly in favour and 2 are strongly against, say, we then might invite a 5th to adjudicate, and that's also when we might call on our international advisory board to sort of act as what we call a Solomon reviewer to kind of to sort of judge between the split vote. We also issue certificates of recognition, so any reviewer is allowed to ask for a certificate if they performed a review. And actually once a year we also publish a thank you commentary in which we name every single reviewer that has reviewed for us over the year, which is a sort of form of recognition. I think last year there were about 600 or 700 reviewers that we used at the Lancet Global Health, but so they were all listed in a comment. Obviously went over a few pages. Okay, so reasons to review then. I mean, I like to think, first of all, you might learn something about what the editor thinks is good to send for a review, which is helpful if you should want to submit to the journal yourself. So I always think that's worth knowing. You also learn about what others are doing in your field, so you get a heads up on the latest work in the field. It's actually just a useful intellectual exercise going through the process of reviewing a paper. It can actually help you write a better paper if you're thinking, through logically the flow of the paper. Does it make sense? Is it, how has the author, structured the introduction? Does the discussion follow on? So I think it's getting into a routine of reviewing regularly actually helps you write papers better. Of course, it gives something back to the academic community. There's this suggestion that you publish one paper, review one paper. It's sort of a quid pro quo thing. You can add it to your CV. I'll mention later, there are various ways to obviously to claim credit for what you've done as a reviewer. And some journals, and the Lancet, actually ask reviewers to write accompanying commentary. So if you did a really good review for the Lancet Global Health, we might invite you when the paper is published to write a commentary to accompany it. So then you'd get a piece of work published in a journal. That might be a good one. So general considerations when reviewing. I mean, obviously, be professional and courteous is what we always say, even if you don't like the paper. Be objective, constructive, and specific. So, don't bring sort of rivalries into it. Don't just say the work is really bad without saying why, and how perhaps it could be made better. Do read the whole paper before starting out, including the appendices. It's nothing more annoying than an author being told, well, you didn't consider this, when actually they may well have considered that, but the reviewer hadn't looked in the right place. The journal always has guidelines, so make sure you follow them for reviews. And reach out to the editor if you have difficulties with the process. So editors are usually approachable, so if anything's gone wrong, you can't access it, or you can't meet the deadline, then just reach out to the editor. And I think the key thing to remember is that the purpose is to assist the authors in improving the paper. You're not out to sort of demonstrate how clever you are. It's actually, you're doing authors a favour, and in the hope that it will be reciprocated when someone else reviews your paper. Don't accept the invitation if it's not your area of expertise. you know, it's obvious when someone doesn't really know the subject area very well, and very annoying for an author to receive an ill-informed review. Again, don't review if you can't commit to the deadline, or if you think you might need a bit of time, extra time, you can always negotiate an extension. It's good to do that rather than just be late. You mustn't show the paper to anyone else unless that's agreed with the editor. Sometimes the review can be a shared process. So like I mentioned with the lived experience reviewers, sometimes a more experienced reviewer will agree with the editor to share the paper with another person. So again, it could be a supervisor and say a postdoc learning how to review. But you should really get the agreement of the editor before involving someone else in your review, and you definitely obviously shouldn't share it any more widely than that, because it's submitted in confidence by the author. Don't write anything you wouldn't be happy to receive yourself. I think that's quite a common sense one to follow. And don't focus on the language or grammar. We get this quite a lot actually at the Lancet journals. You know, we generally have most journals will have copy editors who will help with the language. So reviewers shouldn't be pointing out, you know, spelling mistakes and commas in the wrong place, or badly constructed sentences, unless they don't make sense. And absolutely don't ask authors to include references to your own work unless they're absolutely necessary. We all know this is a bad practice. You know, trying to load up your citations, it's kind of obvious when it happens, so it's good just to, you know, not do it. And again, don't request additional analyses or experiments unless they're absolutely essential to support the claims made in that manuscript. I think in biomedicine it's not quite so common, but in some more of the basic science areas, you know, this is a common annoyance that reviewers will ask for extra experiments just for the sake of it, almost, not that it's necessary for that particular the claims made in the manuscript. And this is a more recent do not that's come up. It's actually tempting possibly to use something like ChatGPT to help you write a review. That's not allowed actually. Elsevier has explicitly stated that you must not upload any manuscripts into a large language model, because again it could violate the author's confidentiality. The ChatGPT or some other large language models will actually, you know, suck that paper into its database of content, and so that then becomes you know, the confidentiality is broken, or copyright is broken essentially, or potentially, and you shouldn't even upload a draft of your review and ask ChatGPT to make it, you know, to tidy up the writing of it, because again you could be giving away content about the paper into the database. So you shouldn't use it, shouldn't upload the paper, and you shouldn't upload your draft review either. There are always journal specific instructions, so check the article type against the journal information. There are loads of reporting checklists that I always recommend reviewers look at, especially new reviewers, because it can really help you to think about whether everything's been considered in the paper. So you've got your consort guidelines for randomized trials, PRISMA for systematic reviews, etc. And there are always journal specific instructions to reviewers, so make sure you attend to them. And if you want to post your review on a website such as Publons, which is a website that allows you to claim recognition for reviews, just make sure that you are allowed to do that by the journal. We don't allow that at the Lancet, because the reviews are not made transparent. They're not that, you know, they're anonymized, and we don't publish them, so you shouldn't post your review on a website like Publons. yes, so again, figure out whether the journal operates open or anonymized peer review, so that you can figure out whether you're allowed to post it anywhere. So structuring the report, you know, most journals will ask for comments to author, in which I think it's most useful to start with a summary paragraph, or your overall thoughts on the paper, followed by major comments by section, and then minor comments. Then you'll have another box in your form, usually with comments to editor, and this isn't seen by the authors. And then also be usually an overall recommendation. So would you recommend accept? Would you recommend reject? Would you recommend revise? And sometimes you're asked to score it as well. So with the summary paragraph in the comments to author, it's really useful for an editor to have a reviewer write a succinct overview of the paper as you interpreted it. So maybe your thoughts on its contribution to the field as a whole, and like a top level summary of the strengths and weaknesses. So just a very short paragraph, in it, you know, your thoughts in a nutshell, essentially. So you could consider things like whether the study adds to current knowledge, whether it uses robust methods, and essentially, does it matter? You know, what is the point of it? Does it actually mean something in the wider context of what's already known? So here's an example of a summary paragraph. This is from a review that was published publicly, so I just borrowed it here. So this reviewer said, this is a very comprehensive study which was completed to a high standard. The knowledge generated is essential to achieve malaria elimination in the sub-region. So it's overall a very positive study, which gives the editor the impression that, you know, this is a paper to take forward, maybe with some minor revisions. So when you're writing major comments to author, you'll be focusing on things that are fundamental to the understanding of the current paper. And you would normally sort of critique that in section order. So major comments in the summary, followed by major comments in the introduction, etc., all the way through to the discussion. And in this example, the reviewer said the study has one major design flaw. CKD is a chronic condition and by definition can only be confirmed when serum creatinine is measured, and from that GFR estimated on 2 separate occasions. Prevalence can be misleading when a single measurement is used. So in this case, you know, the authors have used a method that this reviewer finds very problematic. So that is a major comment, and may even lead, you know, to the rejection of the paper. A minor comment would be something more like, you know, a confusing sentence or a badly drawn figure or incorrect references or technical clarifications. So, you know, this reviewer sort of said in line 141, what does the residue represent? Or please add the uncertainty range. Or something doesn't seem right here. There's a mismatch between the text and the figure. So very sort of minor things, but not so minor that they would be commas and full stops. So section by section then, and this is where I think you know, the overlap between writing a paper and reviewing a paper is most obvious. Start with the introduction and check out whether the research question has been clearly stated. That's a really important one. When I'm giving talks about writing a paper, you know, that's a key thing. Is, do you know what the author set out to achieve? What is the research question? And is a coherent case made for why the research question is important? So have the authors kind of laid out what's already known about the issue, and why this particular piece of research was needed in order to fill a certain gap, and have the most relevant pieces of that previous work been cited. In the methods, you're essentially looking to see whether they've been described clearly enough to allow others to repeat them. And you want to be telling the editor whether or not these are the most appropriate methods to use to answer the research question. And if humans or animals were involved, it's good to state whether or not ethics approval was achieved and informed consent. Pointing that out in the review is useful for an editor. In the results, we'll be looking to see whether all the analyses described in the methods are actually reported in the results, and vice versa, whether there are any results that sort of suddenly pop up in the results section for which the methods haven't been described. We want to be telling us whether they're clearly and consistently presented, whether the figures and text match up. And then in the discussion, I think it's good to try and analyse whether the interpretation reasonably reflects the results, or whether the authors have sort of over-interpreted it, sort of going beyond the data. It's really important to point out potential limitations, because there are obviously always limitations. If they're not presented, take the opportunity to point them out. And similarly, if the results conflict with those of other researchers, have the authors given a potential explanation for that? Have they even noticed that the results conflict with those of other researchers? And importantly, has that research question that you identified at the beginning, has that actually been answered? Important to know. And then have the authors summed up what the findings mean in the context of other work? So that sort of so what question. What does it mean in the bigger the big picture? And then finally, I would come to the title and abstract, and that's the same with writing. You know, sort of these bits are read first but written last. So go back and do the title and abstract and check out whether the title accurately reflects the research question and study type. Does the abstract contain the aim of the study and the methodological details? Are the findings in the abstract a faithful representation of those in the main text, or is there something in the abstract that doesn't somehow appear in the main text? That one. And is the conclusion justified by the data presented? Often in an abstract, I think conclusions can be quite sort of gung-ho, definitely be a bit over optimistic in the interpretation. So just you know, clarify, is that really justified? And it'd be good, and it's good to point out the implications for future work. So in the comments to editor, these aren't seen by the authors, but I think you still need to be courteous, because it's good to look professional, and make sure that the comments align with the comments to the author. I think sometimes it's tempting to say to the editor that this paper is completely terrible, and so you sort of maybe give a reject recommendation, but then in the comments to authors, only write something quite minor, or maybe you're trying to be polite, but actually that's not very helpful if you're recommending rejection, and then the authors see only minor comments. They're going to be quite confused. So if you do think it's terrible, it's something that needs to be shown to the authors in a polite way. You can use this space to highlight any ethical or integrity concerns to the editor without showing it to the author. But it's not always necessary. So if the comments to the author are completely clear, then you don't need to sort of reiterate it in the comments to the editor. You could just say no further comments, or just leave it blank. So usually there's an overall recommendation, which is something like one of these, and the author and the journal might also request a score, as I mentioned, maybe for each component of the paper. You know, the introduction, results, conclusions, etc., might have a score out of 5, and then you might have to put a summary score. But again, every journal will be different, so it's good to read the instructions. And then claiming recognition. So there are several different websites available now that can help you to keep tabs on all the reviews you've done. So Publons, as I mentioned earlier, is a pretty good one. You can list all the reviews that you've done. You can get them verified by the journals themselves. Sometimes it will, depending on the journal, whether they allow it or not, it'll actually give you the name of the paper that you reviewed. Otherwise, it will just be the number of papers you've reviewed for a particular journal. Elsevier also does something. The reviewer hub, you can claim certificates and reward recognition on the Elsevier reviewer hub. So I think it's always worth doing. just to to add to your CV and demonstrate the work that you've put in. So that's I've whizzed through that because I like to sort of throw all the information out and then leave time for questions. So hopefully we can now move over to a discussion, and I'll leave you with these links that we'll get in the when the slides come around. So I'll stop sharing now. I can go back to any slide that anybody wants to look at, but it's nice to see everyone's faces while we do the discussion. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zoe. That was really a fantastically practical set of tips and suggestions, and I think you went over it really clearly. There's just a couple of comments, and I think Tamara's just put in a comment, not a question. I think it'd be a good capacity building exercise to pair early career academics with mid-senior career academics. And has then also asked the question, are aims or hypotheses considered the same as question?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so the research question is sort of the aim or the hypothesis. Absolutely, yeah, that's what I was getting at. Thanks.
So it is the same as the research question. Okay, great. And so I'll just pass it over now. Has anyone else got any questions that you'd like to talk to Zoe about or yarn about?
Even if it's not peer review, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Most of the people on the call I notice are editors, so it's really helpful for us as we're just starting in on this journey to pick up as many tips as we can from a journal like the Lancet. It's really helpful for us.
I've got a question, Zoe.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really good. The bit about not worrying about grammar or spelling, was it? Something like that. I totally understand that in one way, but in another way, I really find it sometimes if no attention's been or not much attention has been paid to that, it's really hard to review a lot because I mean the quality can be so low. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on sending it back to be edited by the actual authors, and how much responsibility do you think authors should have to present something that is well readable, number one, comprehension, number two, because I just find it so frustrating. It's almost like if the authors don't care about the quality of their paper, why should I? And not in minor things, clearly not in cases where a second language is English or inexperience, or like I'm willing to let all that stuff go, but sometimes I find and when you're getting a paper from an experienced team of researchers, often, and sometimes it just feels like, oh, that's somebody else's job to write my paper, and I'm just wondering, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think if you have a paper that's so littered with mistakes that actually it's almost unreadable and unreviewable, then I think it's fine to send it back and say, I can't actually proceed with the review, because then you wouldn't. I think what I was trying to say was, if it's readable enough, it's a decent enough paper. All you can do is sort of point out, you could have written that a bit better, or you didn't. What does that abbreviation stand for? Or very picky little things. I mean, that's something for a copy editor to do further down the line. It shouldn't be for a reviewer to sort of point out the little things. But if the whole thing is completely unreadable, I agree. Then you can't really review it, I think. So it's perfectly fine then to say, look, you've got to go back and submit something better, something that actually, because you know, it's, yeah, I mean, how can you, yeah,
well,
right.
you
I
lose
mean,
faith in science a little bit also, if
yeah.
it's really quite bad. Can you talk a little bit more about the copy editing process? So is that somebody who will actually trawl through all the references and make sure they're all absolutely correct? How far do they actually go in correcting papers and editing the final version of the paper?
The Lancet ones go a long way, actually. I mean, these are sort of technical. There'd be technical reviews. I mean, it's almost like a second peer review. It's almost like it's like it's if you think of a peer review as being scrutinizing the sort of external validity of it. The technical editors are sort of scrutinizing the internal integrity of it. So it's they will do very, very much. They'll be, I mean, they tend to, you know, go through the tables and they'll make sure the percentages are correct. You know, if you've got a series of numerators and denominators, they'll make sure they'll actually calculate all the percentages and make sure they're correct. They will restructure sentences. They might move chunks of paragraphs around to make it flow better. I think we now use software to check the references, so they don't go manually through the references and check them all. There's a piece of software. I've forgotten what it's called, but if you're interested, I can find out. That does that, and it will also format them as well. So it'll put the name of the journal in italics and the volume in bold or whatever, and so there's a magic thing to do that. So that was all automated now, but they do, yeah, they take it, they sometimes edit it very heavily, and I think sometimes authors can be a bit surprised as to how much it's changed, but usually they're very pleased because it's changed for the better, and it is a lot clearer.
So is it worth me saying something about the First Nations journal? Oh, sorry, Alexandra, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just wondering, a follow-up to that then, given the ease with which it would be to review something after it has been properly copy edited, I'm just sort of wondering about the sequencing.
Well, you wouldn't want to spend time copy editing a paper that was rejected, I guess, would you? We probably reject the Lancet Global Health. We probably reject 50% of what goes for peer review. So, yeah, you wouldn't want to spend copy editors' time on those papers that were just going to go out the door. And usually they're not, you know, they're not so terrible you can't review them. But yeah, it's, I think, you know, there are more and more services available to authors now, particularly those whose first language isn't English. You know, there are many organizations and individuals, consultants, who offer services in being an author's editor. So, you know, that you can send it to one of these people who will actually edit your paper before you submit. So it's sort of getting it submission ready. And I think Elsevier might actually offer some of those services. I mean, they're paid for, you know, you have to pay for them, but I'm pretty sure.
I think this is more a question to the Lowitja in terms of what their process is going to be and approach about rejection and so on. Like, I know in Canada, one of the things we have an Institute of Indigenous Peoples Health, and as part of our peer review process, they actually have a different process that is iterative, with the understanding that with the amount of work that goes into pulling together a grant, and especially one that is so heavily community-based, that ideally we won't be having a 50% rejection rate, or, you know, things like that. So it might be more a question also to the Lowitja Journal.
Kath, I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Diana. I think it would be helpful, Diana, if you could talk about the processes at First Nations Journal, because I don't think we it's probably a little bit different from the Lancet. Plus, we do get a different level of articles submitted than the ones that are at the Lancet for a whole lot of reasons. So there are actually a lot that Scott and I reject. We would reject 50% before we even send them out to the editor, let alone, we get a whole load of, we do get a real mixed bag, and some of them are unreadable. But those we try not to send out. We try to look at them and make sure that it's at least a coherent piece of work before we send it on to the editor.
Yeah,
But,
I mean,
yeah, you go, Diana. That'd be
I'll
good.
just, so we do have quite a comprehensive style guide. It doesn't sound like it's as comprehensive as the copy editing that goes on for the Lancet, but we've recently, we're bringing on board an Indigenous copy editor in Australia, so they have a more detailed understanding of the cultural issues being covered, and she also has experience in medical editing. So there's quite a comprehensive style guide, and we can share that with you if you can get a better idea of what's checked. But I think the grammar and the consistency and the references being pointed to in the text, and they will go through it with a pretty fine tooth comb. They'll spend a good few hours over it. But it doesn't sound like it's quite as comprehensive as what the Lancet does. The other thing we're exploring is to bring someone else on board who may be able to work with authors if, say, a reviewer or an editor thinks a paper has potential but maybe needs bringing up to scratch, either in terms of its language or other aspects. So we have somebody that we need to speak to about that. So I think that might be quite an interesting one. And then the other thing we discussed is, and I know it came through in one of the comments, is a sort of, we've got this mentoring idea for reviewers, but do we at some stage bring on board an editor who's willing to work with an author and more of the sort of science of the paper to bring it up to scratch? So there are some things that we're looking at. We're in the very early stages, but we do have copy editing, quite comprehensive copy editing in place, but I would say doesn't sound like it's quite as much as the Lancet's got at the moment.
Are they in-house copy editors, Diana, or are they
no, they're freelancers. So actually,
yeah.
up to now, we've had to use somebody in the UK who I think's done an excellent job, and then we've been through it ourselves as well. But we were literally just about to sign up someone based in Australia, and then we've got somebody else who's interested as well. So really excited about that. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because I know Elsevier, a lot of Elsevier's journals go out to like a sort of an outsourcing company that will do all the copy editing off-site. But
we've got somebody, but yeah, like I say, there's somebody from the UK who spent some time in Australia who's been taking it on with the first issue, but we wanted to have somebody based in Australia and was familiar with the issues over here.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. So any other questions? Yeah,
sorry, I just thought I'd add there, Kath, when we receive the articles or manuscripts back from the copy editor, we also, they're all marked up, so we can also make sure that things work for us in terms of the language that's used. Like we've found, for instance, the copy editor based in the UK took out the word mob and things like that, and APY lands, the capital L was removed, even though we know that that's an area. So we made sure that those things were changed back to the standard that we have here in Australia for the terms that are of use or used quite commonly within the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander world as well. So we're making sure that that's not removed by the copy editor.
Yeah, that's where your style guide comes in, I think, isn't it? It's really useful to have a style guide. So just in terms of having consistency of just how things are spelled, it makes it look more professional if everything is, all the I's words are spelled with an S instead of a Z or vice versa. But also, in specific, we have a whole inclusive language guide, which is kind of separate to the Lancet style guide, and so it will cover things like Indigenous issues, it will cover disability, it will cover trans issues, or so it's really useful to have something like that to refer to, I think, so that you make sure you don't you don't lose some of what's maybe been submitted in the first place by inadvertently editing out cultural terms, but also you don't inadvertently publish something that's offensive.
We'll be happy to share. I mean, we don't want editors and reviewers to be wasting their time on the technicalities of copy editing. But saying that, if anybody wants to have a look at the style guide for interest, just contact Scott and we can share the style guide with you. Please don't waste your time on that. We've got people that will be doing all of that. Any other questions or thoughts or suggestions? I think I've picked out a few things that we might want to talk about in our editor meeting later. Already, it was great to be able to go to your meeting, Zoe, at the Lancet, and we haven't quite got to the stage yet of organising the nice one-pager with all the articles to review. But you know, I really like the idea of being able to just discuss tricky papers. I think we've got a few to talk through this afternoon. The other ideas I think are good are the certificates for reviewers. We might be able to try to start getting those out. That's something we might be able to talk to Amali and Christy about. The thank you to the reviewers in the commentary. I think that sounds like something nice that we could do once a year as well. People think, and inviting really good reviewers, because we know we have had some really excellent reviewers back that have really put a lot of hard work into improving some papers for the first issue. So inviting them to write a commentary. I think actually one of the commentaries we were wondering about was some of the challenges that we came up in the papers. We were wondering if some of the editors might want to write a bit of a commentary about some of the challenges that we've had with a few papers.
I think that's interesting.
If any of the editors on this call be sort of thinking something like that, or some other thoughts for a commentary that you might be interested in. I think those issues you raised, Sandy, are really important.
Yeah, and the other one about what goes where can be really problematic too, often when you've got methods in the introduction and results in the methods and that kind of thing. Trying to tease that out and sort it out can be really quite challenging. So is that something a copy editor does, or who's responsible for reviewing that aspect of a paper?
Yeah, well, our copy editors would definitely do that. Yeah. As I
Right.
say, they definitely, they would. Yeah, you often find results in the methods, or suddenly a result appears in the discussion that you had no idea what is that, where's it come from. So yeah, they will definitely move things around. I mean, they usually flag to an author that they've moved a chunk of text. They'll flag it in the sort of comments, this paragraph has been moved from the discussion section to here, please check, or something, so but generally the reviewers, the authors don't get to see the whole track change version, I don't think, because it usually is just a mess. So they see the sort of the typeset version, but there'll usually be little comments to author saying, we've moved this to here, is that okay, and have I rephrased this okay, and what did you there's there's often lots of questions to the author from the copy editor. Why don't these figures in this column add up, and so there can be quite a few rounds of proofs actually before it's got signed off.
We don't have anything like that level of copy editing, Zoe.
I think it's quite unusual.
I'm wondering whether that might be something that we could benefit from, though, to get like a talk from your copy editor that does something like that, to sort of train up our copy editors or something. I don't know. It just sounds like like a bit of a pipe dream, that level of moving text around.
Yeah, I think they would just raise queries if there were some inconsistencies, but we weren't looking for that. I mean, I think we would hope that most of that would come out of the peer review process in terms of, discussions being in, things from the results being in discussion. But it's obviously a slightly different level, but it would actually be quite interesting to see your style guide of the Lancet, to see what the instructions are and compare it to ours, I think, just to sort of see,
I can ask if they're happy to share it. It's not, we've never made it public. I know some, like the American Medical Association has its, proudly as its style manual sort of publicly available. I think you can even buy a copy of it, I think, in the hard copy. But we've never made it public. But I think it's a shame in some ways. There's a lot of work gone into it. But yeah, I'll ask if they're okay to share it.
Thank you.
There's just one more comment. Adet, who's on a train, just said there's been several first-time authors, and a commentary authored by them may be interesting. What are thoughts? Do people have thoughts on that?
I mean, I think if they've done well enough to get as a first-time author to get a paper published, I mean, that's great. I mean, that's like a full research paper. So in some ways, you might say, well, why do you need a commentary as well? But maybe, just an opinion piece, writing about their experience of having submitted for the first time would be interesting if that's the kind of thing you want to consider. Yeah, or getting a commentary by somebody with lived experience is interesting too. That's always a gives a paper life, if you can publish something like that alongside a piece of research about a topic. If you publish a commentary by someone who's actually gone through the experience, then that can be quite powerful.
Right.
This is Alexandra. I'd really love to see more people with lived experience involved in this in some way. So much of our research is community-based or driven or centered, and it would be nice to have community voice.
Absolutely. Well, it's a requirement of the journal that people have, the first, second or last author has to be Indigenous anyway. We can't have papers that don't have significant input from Indigenous people. That differentiates us from a lot of other journals.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
All right. Well, we just got to getting up to the end, and I know it's early in the morning, and people might need their second cup of coffee, and you need to go to bed, Zoe. But I just want to really thank you so much on behalf of all of us for staying up and for talking us through this. It's really lovely to meet you in person and for you to share your practical expertise. And I really hope this is the start of a long collaboration. We really appreciate your support in supporting us in getting this journal up. It's really, really helpful.
Absolutely, no problem. No, anytime. Yeah, it's been great to meet you all, and do stay in touch.
We will.
And good luck with the journal. I'm looking forward to reading
Zoe.
The first issue.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks to all
Thanks,
the
everyone.
editors for